Darn it. Where were you, Arthur, earlier this morning? When we were doing the prayers. I meant to record all that. So one moment, let's get ourselves organized. We will be reading from Leviticus Bahar, chapter 25, in just a moment. And I'm just gonna mute folks who aren't muted just because of the reverberation that we get when we're not muted. So if you're on your phone and you want to, if we invite questions or whatever, you can just unmute yourself on your phone by *6, or if I'm unable to mute you, you can do that by *6. You can also post in chat. The best way to post in chat is to post to me, not to Rabbi Lerner, because I'm the one managing the chat right now. So, and I see there's another new message. Where can we access the text? I will be sharing the text on the screen. So you can also access it at Sefaria, for those of you who want to be able to see it. If you go to sefaria.org.
How do you spell that?
I'm typing it in the chat, and you spell it Sefaria. And if you then go to Leviticus chapter 25, you will find it there as well. If you just Google that, you'll get to Sefaria, I'm guessing, as well. But I will be sharing it on the screen as well.
Page 69 for the blessing.
Okay, yeah, so let's go to page 69. I'm going to share that too in a second as soon as I get there, so I don't make you all dizzy scrolling through the prayer book. Page 69 on the screen. 1 second, and I will get us there. For the blessings for the Torah study. Okay, but before I do that, I just want to invite you all to just take a look in each other's eyes. Just in one of my classes, Carl, who's on the call, we were closing the class and we were saying goodbye to each other, and Carl did this really exquisite thing, which is he just named everyone in the class and said thank you to each one of us. And it felt so delicious. He was really thanking me. And then he was thanking the next person. And I knew it was different thank yous for each of us, and yet it was such a genuine thank you. So we don't know each other, but we can just all be grateful that we've all shown up here together to share time together, to study and learn Torah together, and to be in community together. So if you would just take a moment and look in each other's faces. Thank you all for being here. It so nourishes us. Hi, Laura, what a treat. And Susan, Martha, and Heidi, and all these folks. I'm gonna look at the next screen for a minute because I'm not seeing everybody on one screen. Some folks are on their phones. We don't see you, but you're welcome here. Isn't it delicious to be in community? Thank you all for being here. Okay, so now I will share my screen. So yeah,
While you're doing that, Kat, it reminded me of my younger days watching Romper Room. And remember, she would hold up this special magic mirror and say, "I see Kat."
Yes, I do remember that.
Thank you for reliving the memory.
You're so welcome. So here we go. I put into chat earlier, but I will try to do that again. Okay, cool. I will try to do that again in a minute. To access the prayer book, you can also go to Beyt Tikkun, BeytTikkun.org. And if you click there, then on that homepage of Beyt Tikkun website, you'll see top stories, and then you'll see Beyt Tikkun prayer book. And then you click on that, and you'll be able to click again to access the prayer book. So that's how you access the prayer book. And Philip, I just see your message. So glad you're here. Thank you. Okay, take it away here.
You're on page 69.
Yep.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hamborach, Baruch Adonai Hamborach leolam ba'ed, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu im kol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. So now, okay, stop sharing this. Give me a second. There's multi-moving pieces here. Oh, okay, again, Heidi said she'd start reading, but I'm going to share again. Safaria, magic of, okay, let me get to part one, line one. Okay, I need to do that.
I'm muted.
So go for it, Heidi. I'm going to mute us so that we not.
So we're starting, wait, say what, we're on Deuteronomy.
No,
I
I told them we're on
okay.
Leviticus
Leviticus
25:1, and it's also on the screen. It's Leviticus
Okay.
chapter 25:1. I'm going to mute us. Heidi, go for it. Heidi, we need you to unmute yourself. Otherwise, we can't hear you, sadly.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yes, that is much better. Thank you.
Yud-He Vav-He spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai. Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when you enter the land that I assign you, the land shall observe a Sabbath of the Lord. 6 years you may sow your field, and 6 years you may prune your vineyard and gather in the yield. But in the 7th year, the land shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, a Sabbath of Yud-He Vav-He. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. You shall not reap the aftergrowth of your harvest or gather the grapes of your untrimmed vines. It shall be a year of complete rest for the land. But you may eat whatever the land during its Sabbath will produce. You, your male and female slaves, the hired and bound laborers who live with you, and your cattle and the beasts in your land may eat all its yield. You shall count off 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the period of 7 weeks of years gives you a total of 49 years. Then you shall sound the horn loud. The 7th month of the 10th day of the month, the Day of Atonement, you shall have the horn sounded throughout your land, and you shall hallow the 50th year. You shall proclaim release throughout the land for all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. Each of you shall return to its holdings, and each of you shall return to his family. That 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. You shall not sow, neither shall you reap the aftergrowth or harvest the untrimmed vines, for it is a jubilee. It shall be holy to you. You may eat the growth direct from the field in this year of jubilee. Each of you shall return to its holding, to his holdings. When you sell property to the neighbor or buy anything from your neighbor, you shall not wrong one another. In buying from your neighbor, you shall not deduct only for the number of years since the Jubilee, and in selling to you, he shall charge you only for the remaining crop years. The more such years, the higher the price you pay. The fewer such years, the lower the price you pay. For what he is selling you is the number of harvests. Do not wrong one another, but fear your God, for I am Yud-He Vav-He. I am your God. You shall observe my laws faithfully, keep my rules, that you may live upon the land in security. The land shall yield its fruit, and you shall eat your fill, and you shall live upon it in security. And should you ask, what are we to eat in the 7th year, if we may neither sow nor gather in our crops? I will ordain my blessing for you in the 6th year, so it shall yield a crop sufficient for 3 years. When you sow in the 8th year, you will still be eating old grain of that crop. You will be eating the old until the 9th year, until its crops come in. But the land must not be sold beyond reclaim, for the land is mine. You are but strangers resident with me. Throughout the land that you hold, you must provide for the redemption of the land. If your kinsman is in straits and has to sell part of his holding, his nearest redeemer shall come and redeem what his kinsman had sold. If a man has no one to redeem for him, but prospers and acquires enough to redeem with, he shall compute the year since its sale, refund the difference to the man to whom he sold it, and return to his holding. If he lacks sufficient means to recover it, what he sold shall remain with the purchaser until Jubilee. In the Jubilee year, it shall be released, and he shall return to his holding. If a man sells a dwelling house in a walled city, it may be redeemed until a year has elapsed since its sale. The redemption period shall be a year. If it is not redeemed before a full year has elapsed, the house in the walled city shall pass to the purchaser beyond reclaim throughout the ages. It shall not be released in the Jubilee. But houses in the villages that have no encircling walls shall be classed as open country. They may be redeemed, and they shall be released through the Jubilee. As for the city of the Levites, the houses in the cities they hold, the Levites shall forever have the right of redemption. Such property as redeemed from the Levites, houses sold in a city they hold, shall be released through the Jubilee, for houses in the cities of the Levites are their holdings among the Israelites. But the unenclosed land about their cities shall not be sold, cannot be sold, for that is their holding for all time. If your kinsman, being in straits, comes under your authority and you hold him through a resident alien, let him live by your side. Do not exact from him advance or accrued interest, but fear your God. Let him live by your side as your kinsman. Do not lend him your money at advance interest or give him your food at accrued interest. I, Yud-He-Vav-He, am your God. I brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan, to be your God. If your kinsman under you continues in straits and must give himself over to you, do not subject him to the treatment of a slave. He shall remain with you as a hired or bound laborer. He shall serve you with only until the Jubilee year. Then he and his children with him shall be free of your authority. He shall go back to his family and return to his ancestral holding. For they are my servants, whom I freed from the land of Egypt. They may not give themselves over into servitude. You shall not rule over him ruthlessly. You shall fear your God. Such male and female slaves as you may have, it is from the nations round you, about you, that you may acquire male and female slaves. You may also buy them from among the children of alien residents among you, or from their families that are among you, whom you begot in your land. These shall become your property. You may keep them as a possession for your children after you, for them to inherit as property for all time. Such you may treat as slaves. But as for your Israelite kinsmen, no one shall rule ruthlessly over the other. If a resident alien among you has prospered and your kinsman being in straits comes under his authority and gives himself over to the resident aliens among you or to an offshoot of the alien's family, he shall have the right of redemption even after he has given himself over. One of his kinsmen shall redeem him, or his uncle's son shall redeem him, or any one of his family who is of his own flesh shall redeem him. Or if he prospers, he may redeem himself. He shall compute with his purchaser the total from the year he gave himself over to him until the Jubilee year. The price of his sale shall be applied to the number of years as though it were for a term as a hired laborer under the other's authority. If many years remain, he shall pay back for his redemption in proportion to his purchaser's price. And if few years remain until the Jubilee year, he shall so compute. He shall make payment for his redemption according to the years involved. He shall be under his authority as a laborer hired by the year. He shall not rule ruthlessly over him in your sight. If he has not been redeemed in any of those ways, he and his children with him shall go free in the Jubilee year. For it is to me that the Israelites are servants. They are my servants, who I freed from the land of Egypt. I, Yud He Vav He, your God.
The next two sentences too, Heidi, are part of it. Thank you.
You shall not make idols for yourself, or set up yourselves carved images or pillars, or place figured stones in your land to worship upon. For I, Yud He Vav He, am your God. You shall keep my Sabbaths and venerate my sanctuary, mine, that of Yud He Vav He. If you follow my laws and faithfully...
That's great. Thank you so much. Beautiful. Stop sharing.
So there.
Go ahead. You're good.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Anybody? You want to raise your hand if you can hear me? Okay, good. All right. So this is, I want to repeat something I talked about last time. We have to keep it in mind every time we read Torah, that there are always two voices in Torah, because there are two voices in every human being ever living in class societies or patriarchal societies, namely the voice of love, kindness, and compassion and generosity, and the voice of domination and power over. And as I say, if you look at any of the pre-existing religions before Judaism, they were mostly dominated by the voice of domination and power over. They were supported by ruling elites, and they had the function largely of reconciling people to the ruling elites and the systems in which they had been subordinated. Judaism comes along and it has a different orientation. Judaism is primarily the voice of the slaves who have been freed, and the central vision of that is the Passover and the story of liberation from Egypt. And but of course, when you get out of the physical enslavement, you still have the psychological and spiritual enslavement. And so in the remaining, in the subsequent 3,000 years, our people have had internalized two different voices. On the one hand, the voice of the dominant systems of the world that tell you that the world is made up of people who are just out for themselves and looking out for number one, and that you should maximize your own power and wealth and screw other people, and basically you're not gonna, you don't care about them, care about yourself, maybe your family, care about your family. But, and that we see that being repeated even in our own day, and for a variety of reasons in the United States, in Israel, a lot of other places as well, most other places as well. So why would we bother to read Torah? Because the amazing thing about a Torah is that it's not the only voice, that there's a counter voice, but a voice that says, no, there can be a different kind of world. And this chapter has within it both voices. So on the one end, so if you try to imagine when the Torah was actually put together, which we don't know exactly, but it's basically sometime between 500 and 300 BCE. And in that period, according to the tradition, there was a thing called the Anshe Knesset Agdolah, the men of the great assembly, who sat together and created this Torah, or wrote. Now that's not the religious story. The religious story is it was all given to Moses on Mount Sinai. But for those of us who have some sense of the likelihood of that, we're more likely to look at the historical factors that shape the Torah and see that in the stories of the intervening history between that time and this, it was very rare for people to have reference to any Torah, at least until about 500 BCE. So, and that what they found when the king suddenly discovered in the treasury scrolls is likely to have been written by Jeremiah and is the Deuteronomy. So, but in the subsequent putting together of the Torah, the basic principle that has been part of Jewish tradition from then right up till now is inclusion. Namely, you take all voices and put them together. Now imagine a group of people sitting down and trying to say, assembling all of the various scrolls and various stories by, and trying to decide what goes in where. Well, the voice of the, let's say the realists, the reduction, the people who were the reductionist, materialist consciousness amongst the Jewish leadership were saying, wait a second, you've got to qualify, you've got to put in our voice as well. And so in this chapter, we see both voices. We see the voice of liberation, unbelievable voice of liberation. And then just right afterwards, because this is how it often is, sometimes it's in the same sentence, but sometimes it's more clearly delineated as in this chapter, between, on the one hand, God is the liberator and liberating us from all kinds of oppression, including material oppression, and on the other hand, this voice that says, okay, you get to keep slaves and you get to, they get passed on and all kinds of stuff that you'd say, wait a second, what's liberation about that? Okay, so now you might say, well, you could imagine there being one person who wrote this whole thing who had both voices in his or her head and put that in so it's to reassure people. But for my purposes, for what I want us to focus on is the first part of this chapter, the part that is the revolutionary message, and that has been carried on through the years. And there are other references to this to the sabbatical year that come earlier and aren't in here. And the most important one is that it is here we're talking about release from work in the seventh year, but an earlier reference also says, and all loans are forgiven on the seventh year. All loans are forgiven on the seventh year. So it refers to here that notion, but it's more explicitly in Mishpatim, in the parsha called Mishpatim in the book of Exodus. But since we're focusing here, I want to say that what's here is pretty revolutionary. Okay, it starts with the notion that the land deserves a rest. Okay, now this doesn't sound so revolutionary to us anymore because eventually the government of the United States recognized that that the reason why they were facing land that was no longer productive, and that was like the Dust Bowl in the 1930s, was that the people were overworking the land and that the land rebelled and wouldn't produce anymore. Now, to say the land rebelled is a way of talking about it that imagines that in some form or other that the earth has, well, let's say some degree of consciousness. And I'm not going to go fully into that right today, although I can recommend some books that argue this quite consistently. And I'll just say that from my standpoint, there is no such thing as matter separate from consciousness. The notion of the word matter, or what then became the focus of physics, was very useful if what you were looking for was to have control over the physical world. However, it turned out not to be totally useful when dealing with other aspects of our life, including the production of food. There you had to look at a different level. You had to, or let's say, at the earth itself. And we're seeing it right now with the rebellion of the earth against the way that we've organized the society. And Kat in the earlier part reads that work, the V'hayayim Shemoah, it shall come to pass if you pay attention to these mitzvot, things will be good. The earth will give forth plenty. And if you don't pay attention to this world, if you don't create a world based on love and kindness and generosity and social and economic justice and environmental sanity, then you'll actually get thrown off the land. That will happen. Hasn't happened yet, you're saying? Well, actually, it's happened to people who have not given the earth a rest. So this notion that the earth deserves a Shabbat is itself, of course, one that runs counter to our sense that, well, the earth can't possibly have consciousness or whatever. But the notion that is being put forward here is that there is some consciousness force in the universe. We call it Yud He Vav He, that gets pronounced in our prayers as Adonai, but if you try to sound out those 4 letters, first of all, there are no such vowels in the Torah, and secondly, if you tried to put vowels to it, it would be very hard to but the Christians, when they created their Bible, they put the Y into a J, and then they came up with Jehovah. Okay, but the Jews never have done that. We don't think that Yud Vav He is a word, is a name. It is a concept. It's a concept of transformation, because the last 3 letters, He Vav He, Hoveh, is that which is, and Yud always indicates future tense. So it's moving from that which is to that which can and should be. If you want to, if you look at it that way, okay, this is not widely accepted because Jews have not been, the teachers have not been interested in really looking at how the God of the universe could possibly be a force of transformation, but that's what it is. That's what, and when God is asked by Moses, "What's your name?" I'll tell. Pharaoh's going to ask, "What's your name?" God responds, "I am I will be whom I shall be." Translated in the King James, it was mistranslated as "I am who I am," but Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. In other words, I am that which can be. I am the possibility of possibility. I am the force in the universe that makes possible the transformation from that which is to that which ought to be. So, so that's who's speaking here, the force of transformation. And they said Bihar. Why do they emphasize? This starts with the name of this chapter of this Torah Parsha is Bihar. Why Bihar, on the mountain? Wasn't everything given on the mountain? Is that what that's was part of the Orthodox tradition? Was, hey, the whole thing was given on the mountain. So whoever was putting this together, the side that wanted to really emphasize the revolutionary part here said, this came from Har Sinai, on the Mount Sinai, okay? Meaning also, by the way, the rest is not necessarily from that same place, except for the 10 speech acts that the Christians call the 10 Commandments, but in Hebrew Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 speech acts, but this isn't in that. So that's why they had to emphasize this comes from the mountain. So here it says, okay, let the earth relax on the seventh year. The earth itself deserves a place of rest. This section is often referred to as Shemitah. This whole practice of Shemitah, and Shemitah is about release. So the first level is releasing the earth from the obligation to serve us, and letting it relax for a little bit each seventh year. But secondly, and very importantly, you see it goes very quickly into a relaxation that is for social justice, because it then goes into saying you have to leave the land fallow in that year, and the poor are able to come and eat the fruit of the land. The land becomes hefker. It literally it becomes ownerless. In other words, you've been working on this land and you've had it for a certain amount of time, and then on the seventh year you've got to stop. But you're allowed to go out and take some stuff yourself. Although, let's see what the rabbis say here in the Mishnah. They say it's like this, that you're during the Shemitah, that's this whole process, the land is left lie fallow, and all agricultural activity, including plowing, planting, pruning, and harvesting, is forbidden. Other cultivation techniques, such as watering, fertilizing, weeding, spraying, trimming, and mowing, may be performed as a preventive measure only, but not to improve the growth of trees or other plants. Additional fruits or herbs which grow of their own accord and where no watch is kept over them are deemed ownerless, namely available to anybody. So this is the time when the poor have a right to go on your land and take as much food as they want, certainly as much of the vegetables and the fruit as they, and of course, so this is one of the major redistributive measures of Torah, is that, and it's not that you're doing them a favor, okay? This is the law. This is the law. You cannot, on the seventh year, now you too may be able to take some of the stuff that falls on the ground, like fruit or whatever, or grows spontaneously, but you have to leave it a lot for everybody else. So that now there is the injunction elsewhere that says, even in the other 6 years, if something falls from, when you're doing a harvesting and something falls from your hands or from the cart onto the ground, you have to leave it there for the poor to come and pick it up. But on the seventh year, it's no longer yours, okay? You don't own it at all. But then the eighth year, you get to own it again, okay? So you haven't lost everything if you bought some land. But then it talks about the Jubilee, and the Jubilee is the year when that comes after the seventh of the 7 years. On the Jubilee, everybody returns to their original distribution of. So the original distribution of land was done by tribes, and so you go back to what tribe you came from, and your tribe owns the land that was originally allocated, and it was allocated by God according to roughly equal in the value of the land. So this is a major redistribution, okay? Because you may have left the land, you may have married out, you're in another place, and you're no longer, you don't feel connected to it. Maybe your father, your grandfather already moved to another place and you're living in someplace else. But if you want any ownership, you have to go back to the original place because and where if you bought anything. Now it warns people, okay, be fair. If you're buying some land from me, you're not really buying the land. The land doesn't belong to you ever. It belongs only to God. That's what God's saying when he says, when God says, or she says, or it says, look, you first of all that you should tell them, whoever is buying land from you, they're not buying land. They're buying a certain number of harvests that they have a right to. But eventually, the land is all going to go back to, first of all, in the seventh year, it's going to belong to nobody, and everybody can come to your land and take as much as they need. But on the and then on the 50th year, then at that point, you go back to your original land, and they go back to their original land. So it's a redistribution that essentially equalizes things again, so that there must have already been in God's consciousness or in whoever came up with this brilliant idea, the idea that things get unequal, that there are different people have different foci, that maybe this land the land here didn't produce as much as the land over there, and so forth, and so they moved, and things got unequal. Some people ended up with more than others. Okay, it hasn't. The Torah hasn't forbidden people from accumulating more than others. It just redistributes it. Doesn't say it's a sin. It just says, okay, it's not really yours. And if you're saying, we don't, how are we going to do this? That's my land. And God comes in here and says, no, ki li kol haaretz. The whole land is mine, not yours. Who are you? You are people who are just here as sojourners on the land. Okay, you're sojourners here. And the truth of the matter is that most of us have a lot of trouble getting that into our head, because it's a rather it's a rather shocking message, but it's also a deep truth that that we are here for a little bit of time, and then we're going to die, and we're going to go away, and there'll be others that come after us. This is something that in the book of Kohelet, the guy who wrote Ecclesiastes, he's moaning about it. He's saying, I worked very hard. I did all kinds of things, but who knows? The people who come after me, will they be a fool? Will they be smart? Will they use will they continue what I wanted to have happen? No. So it's hard to really get it, that we're all going to be dead, and that we're just here as sojourners, and we don't have rights to property. And this is what it's essentially saying. You don't have a right to property in anything like what it meant to have a right of property in capitalist societies. There is no such right. You have a right to claim it for 6 years and control it for those 6 years. The 7th year, you've got to let it go. Let go and let everybody who wants. It's hefker. It's like dust of the earth. Nobody can claim to own that land. And so if somebody says, you can't come onto my land, okay, nope, you're out. Okay, the 7th year, you don't have any right to say that to anybody. They can come and take whatever they need, and you can too take what you need. So do you see how it's really an anti-capitalist consciousness? It says nobody owns anything here. Nobody owns this land. And by the way, this consciousness was there in the beginning of the Zionist movement, or at least when the Zionists were buying up land. They weren't buying it up in the name of the person or a group of people who wanted to live here. They were buying it up in the name of the Jewish people, that nobody in particular would own land. Now it got screwed up, as we know, in a variety of ways. But well, I'm not going to go with the Zionist history at the moment. But okay, so what's being said here is, hey, no right to property, no right to property, a right to have to work on the land for 6 years and then share it on the 7th year with everyone. And it's not like you can go out and say, this is mine and I'm sharing it. No, this is God's, and God is sharing it with me and everyone else who wants it. So it's a different, it's a radically different consciousness, a radically different consciousness than the consciousness of our contemporary world. So before I go into the next part of the conversation, which is how will we, what can we take from this for the contemporary world? I want to ask you if you would be willing now to go into small groups and just give your reactions to this, reactions to this whole thing, with the people in the small group that you're in. How many people do we have?
So there would be 4 to, just tell me how many people you want in a room.
Well, let's say 4 people in a room. With that?
3 to 4. Okay.
Okay, 3 or 4 people in a room. Okay, so we're going to send you to a little room with somebody, and first thing you have to do is introduce yourself to them, say a word or two about who you are, where you're coming from. I mean, not physically, but whatever. And what time is it now?
11:20.
Okay, how about 10 minutes in that?
That's not enough time.
What?
For 3 to 4 people?
Okay, then make it 3 people. Okay, 10.
Well, I can't, it's 3 to 4. I can't do that. Like, let me see something. Recreate.
You can't do 3?
No, it doesn't matter because.
Okay, let's do.
Matter. No, just gonna be 3 to 4.
Okay, so 10 minutes and share your thoughts and make sure that everybody gets a chance to share what you are thinking about this. And then we'll come back and get to the next part, which is what part of this can we use in reconstructing our society today?
So for those of you who aren't familiar, most of you are, you'll get a little thing that pops up on your screen that says enter breakout room. So go to your breakout room. I'm gonna unmute everybody. I'm just gonna get really obnoxious for a moment. But I do that because it seems to help facilitate getting unmuted in the rooms. But if you're on the phone, it's *6 to unmute. Okay, so I've opened the rooms. And now you're on. Get really obnoxious.
See me? I'm not sure. I'm supposed to go to 10, but.
That's fine. There's 3 people who don't go.
Yeah. I guess I could push later so they won't expect me to show up.
Are you going to go to the room?
It says join. Join later.
Mark, do you want to go to your room? Do you want to go to your room? Go to your room.
Anne, hi.
To a room right now.
You don't want to go right now?
No. But
Okay.
I'll be back to hear later what's coming in 10 minutes.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
come back in 10 minutes then.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
It's freaky, isn't
It is.
it?
10 minutes.
Because that's the amount of time we're supposed to be in the breakout room. Everybody's the 3 or 4 people are gonna talk about what is useful today, which is what I'm interested in. How he's gonna interpret